mindset that made colonial India. Modi makes war cry to end it. 10-year erase Macaulay mission for the Punarjagran of Bharat. Will this mark the end of India's colonial mindset?
Hello and welcome. You are watching Explained on NewsX with me, Megha Sharma. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for a national resolve to free ourselves from the mindset of slavery that Macaulay imposed on India, setting a 10-year time frame leading up to the 200th year of Macaulay's campaign to reverse its legacy. Listen in what the Prime Minister said.
आज आपके इस सम्मानित मंच से मैं गुलामी की मानसिकता से मुक्ति के इस विषय पर भी विस्तार से अपनी बात रखूंगा, लेकिन इसके लिए हमें 190 इयर्स पीछे जाना पड़ेगा। 1857 के स्वतंत्रता संग्राम से भी पहले वो साल था 1835। 1835 में ब्रिटिश सांसद थॉमस बेबिंगटन मैकाले ने भारत को अपनी जड़ों से उखाड़ने के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा अभियान शुरू किया था। उसने ऐलान किया था, मैं ऐसे भारतीय बनाऊंगा, वो दिखने में तो भारतीय होंगे लेकिन मन से अंग्रेज होंगे। और इसके लिए मैकाले ने भारतीय शिक्षा व्यवस्था में आमूलचूल परिवर्तन नहीं बल्कि उसका समूल नाश कर दिया। खुद गांधी जी ने भी कहा था कि भारत की प्राचीन शिक्षा व्यवस्था एक सुंदर वृक्ष थी जिसे जड़ से हटाकर नष्ट कर दिया। साथियों, भारत की शिक्षा व्यवस्था में हमें अपनी संस्कृति पर गर्व करना सिखाया जाता था। भारत की शिक्षा व्यवस्था में पढ़ाई के साथ ही कौशल पर भी उतना ही जोर था।
The Prime Minister is referring to the 1853 introduction of the Macaulay education system, which established English as the medium of instruction and prioritized Western literature and science over traditional Indian learning. Thomas Babington Macaulay was a British historian, poet and Whig politician. Macaulay was born at the Rothley Temple in Leicestershire on 25th October 1800, the son of Zachary Macaulay, a Scottish Highlander who became a colonial governor and abolitionist, and Selina Mills of Bristol, a former pupil of Hannah More. Macaulay served as a secretary at war between 1839 and 1841 and as the paymaster general between 1846 and 1843. In 1833, Thomas Macaulay accepted the appointment as the first law member of the Governor-General's Council. In 1834, Macaulay arrived in India, where he served on the Supreme Council between 1834 and 1838. And this is where it begins. This is where Thomas Babington Macaulay, owing to his ideology, devised a plan to introduce Western institutional education to India. In 1835, Macaulay decided to impose the English language in India's educational system and called for introducing Western science and literature studies. At the time, colonial powers viewed the Indian education system as inferior to what they followed back home in Britain, the Western model of education. It all began when Thomas Macaulay wrote a paper called Macaulay's Minute on Education. In the paper, Macaulay strongly pushed for English as the language of instruction for higher education and recommended that all government funds for education be directed towards promoting English and Western sciences and to stop funding Oriental studies. In Macaulay's Minute on Education paper, Macaulay stated that the dialects commonly spoken amongst the natives of this part of India contain neither literary nor scientific information. He believed that those who wanted to pursue higher studies can be effected by means of some language, not vernacular, amongst the people. Then comes the most controversial claim in his paper. Macaulay wrote that he was He has not met any person who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. He further said that this intrinsic superiority of the Western literature is fully admitted by those members of the committee who support the Oriental plan of education. Macaulay's long-term goal aimed at creating a layer of the new class of Indians who would grow up on a diet of Western education and the English language. In other words, an English-speaking elite class in India. This policy change in colonial India favored Western education and promised upward mobility led to support dying out for India's traditional education system and local languages. Macaulay's plan was implemented through the English Education Act of 1835, which established English as the medium of instruction and prioritized Western education over traditional Indian learning. The English Education Act was implemented via the downwards filtration theory, which aimed to educate a small upper-class elite who would then spread knowledge to the masses. The policy focused on educating a select few Indians from the upper and middle classes, assuming that knowledge would trickle down to the rest of the population. On the ground, government funds were redirected to promote Western education and institutions, while funding for Oriental learning was reduced or stopped. English was made the official language for government jobs and court, replacing Persian. Traditional Indian languages, literature and sciences were largely neglected, leading to a decline in the indigenous knowledge systems and creating a significant cultural and educational divide. Let's take a look at some of these controversial chapters or rules of the education system introduced by Thomas Macaulay. More than just a change in language, Macaulay wanted to create a class of quote-unquote brown Englishmen. In his Minute on Indian Education, Macaulay wrote that we must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. Macaulay believed that education was not to be given directly to the masses but only to the upper classes. The British, in particular Macaulay, believed that knowledge would filter down from the English-educated elite to the rest of the society. In reality, it created a permanent elite disconnected from the masses and loyal to the British. Macaulay did not just want to create a new education policy, he blatantly rejected and denigrated the Indian knowledge system. He declared Sanskrit and Arabic literature to be fruitful of monstrous superstitions and Indian knowledge in astronomy, mathematics, medicine to be worthless compared to European knowledge. This led to systematic dismantling of traditional pathshalas, madrasas and gurukuls. Macaulay's compulsion did not only stay put at the lower education. From 1835 onwards, government funds were almost entirely diverted to English medium colleges and schools. Indigenous schools lost state funding and collapsed. This made English proficiency the only gateway to government jobs and social status, marginalizing 99% of the population who spoke only Indian languages. While Macaulay himself was secular, the 1835 policy opened the floodgates for Christian missionaries. After decades of restriction, missionaries were now allowed and indirectly funded to set up English medium schools whose declared aim was conversion to Christianity. Many schools forced Bible study and portrayed Hinduism and Islam as backward and superstitious. Indian historians, both pre- and post-independence, had overwhelmingly critical thoughts about the English Education Act. Many Indians have criticized Macaulayism, claiming that it uprooted India's traditions in sectors such as finance and replaced them with a foreign system which was wholly unsuited to India. In addition, they claim that Macaulayism caused foreign systems of thought to become prioritized over Indian systems of thought, particularly Hindu systems of thought. On the other hand, many historians argue that English education inadvertently gave Indians the ideological tools like liberalism and nationalism, which helped in fighting the British rule. The Macaulay education system has been criticized historically. Despite benefiting from it, Nehru saw the negative impact of the system, which aimed to create a class of Indians who were British in taste and intellect, which was seen as a form of mental enslavement. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel advocated for an education system that would produce citizens with confidence and national pride, moving away from the colonial mindset. He envisioned universities and educational institutions as places that nurture responsible citizens with strong and moral values rooted in ancient Indian traditions. Mahatma Gandhi was one of the most vocal critics of Macaulay's system, viewing it as destructive to India's cultural roots and self-reliance. He described India's ancient education system as a beautiful tree that was uprooted and destroyed by the British policies. He argued that Western education acted on its impediment for the country, fostering dependency and moral decay rather than holistic development. In the end, the sum total of the results today of Macaulay's policy, decided nearly 200 years ago, was that Prime Minister Narendra Modi referred to as psychological slavery, which must be removed permanently. To eradicate the colonial mindset, the Indian government took major steps. India's modern decolonization efforts extend beyond its 1947 independence to ongoing initiatives aimed at removing the vestiges of colonial mindset in governance, law, military and culture. This process involves replacing British-era symbols, laws and systems with those reflecting an indigenous Indian identity and heritage. The biggest switch-up was the introduction of the National Education Policy of 2020. The National Education Policy emphasizes using the mother tongue as the medium of instruction and has seen significant implementation on efforts over the past decade. The NEP 2020 promotes a three-language formula that requires students to learn three languages with the goal of promoting multilingualism and preserving linguistic diversity. The policy emphasizes flexibility, allowing states to choose which languages are taught as long as at least two of the three are native to India. The three languages typically include the mother tongue, the regional language, another Indian language like Hindi or English, and a third language that could be classical Indian, another modern Indian language, or a foreign language. As we mark the progress under the National Education Policy and other decolonization initiatives, Prime Minister Modi's vision calls on every Indian to join the mission of shedding this colonial mindset within the next decade. 2035, the 200th anniversary of Macaulay's Minute. By reclaiming our indigenous knowledge, languages and pride, India is not just educating its youth but empowering a nation to stand tall on the global stage, free from the shadows of the past. Well, with that, I take a short break. Thanks for watching Explained on NewsX.
That made colonial India. Modi makes war cry to end it. 10-year erase Macaulay mission for the Punarjagran of Bharat. Will this mark the end of India's colonial mindset?